Okay, so I'll call this meeting to order and welcome everyone here to the meeting of the Missoula County Public Schools Board. And right now we are missing Trustee Decker, Trustee McDonald,
Trustee Wake and
Trustee
Beers.
Beers, and Trustee Wake. And Trustee Wake went home sick today, so I'm thinking she might not be here, but I think the others might be coming in a little bit late.
Trustee Decker, she was with me and Helena today. She's on her way.
Okay, thanks. And so now that we have the roll call all set, Elizabeth, okay, so we'll stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. Are there any requests from any trustees to either modify the agenda as it's written as to the order, or to revise it as to correct it? Trustee Lorenzo?
I'd like to pull items 7A1 and 7A2 off of the consent agenda.
Okay. Okay, we've made that modification, and just to explain, at the request of any board member, items that are on the consent agenda, which means that there wouldn't be any board discussion, although there could be public comment, are taken off the consent agenda, which means there can be board discussion now on those items. And so that's the modification we've made to the agenda. So now we move on to item number 4, which is to approve the Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes from September 26, 2017. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Moved by Trustee Smith. Is there a second? Second by Trustee Duggar. Are there any, I should have asked, any corrections? Trustee Duggar. Any corrections? So the motion stands. So all trustees in favor of approving the minutes from the regular meeting from September 26th, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to item number 5A, which is public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's anyone here in the audience that wants to bring something to the board's attention of any nature that has to do with the governing of our school district, we love to hear from you during public comment on non-agenda items. Because it hasn't been noticed up as something the board will be talking about, we don't have a conversation about it. But if it's something that needs to be discussed later, we can put it on as an agenda item. So if anyone has any public comment on non-agenda items? See nobody, then we'll move on to B, which is correspondence. Oh,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
During public comment time?
No. Because you're
Okay.
not a member of the public.
It's kind of a technical question about the agenda, but
Do you want to go back to 3 about approving the agenda?
never mind. I'll let go.
Okay. Okay. So now we move on to 6A, which would normally be student trustee reports, but we don't ask our student trustees to attend the second meeting of every month because they already attend the first meeting of every month, and they're usually very involved students who have a lot of things going on after school, so there are no student trustees present. So then we have the Health Insurance Trust Fund report, and we see this. It's a routine Health Insurance Trust Fund report. This is for the month of September 2017. Is there anything of note in the report, Dave? Or whoever? Nope. Okay. And then the 6C are announcements from Superintendent Thane.
Thank you. And tonight I have 3 special announcements in addition to the normal calendar updates. This past week, Chair Holland, Vice Chair Lorenzen, and Vice Chair Wake and I attended the Montana Conference of Education Leadership in Billings. And the Missoula County Public Schools Board of Trustees was recognized as the 2017 Outstanding School Board in the state of Montana. And we were there to collect the award. There were 3 areas that were assessed by the group in evaluating applications, and they included policy work. And over the course of the last 2 years, this board has adopted or revised 27 different policies. They also assessed the board's work with regard to facilities, and we all know we've had significant facility work with our bond projects over the last 2 years. And the third area was innovative programming. And of course, we've worked hard on the implementation of our Achievement for All plan and our 21st century model of education. And so the powers that be saw fit to recognize MCPS. We will display the award temporarily in our office at the 6th Street Administration Building. And we're hopeful when we can put the pieces together that we'll establish a new boardroom in the former Missoula College location, and we'll prominently display it at that point in time. But in addition to the recognition, I would just like to add my thanks to each of you as trustees and to the board collectively for all your work on behalf of our students and the Missoula community. We know that it's a lot of time and energy and very little compensation, but there are intrinsic rewards associated with your work, so we do certainly appreciate it. The second item, while in Billings, our Vice Chair, Ann Wake, assumed the presidency of the Montana School Boards Association for the 2017-28 year, and we're really not only proud of Ann, but appreciate her dedication and the amount of time she's devoted to professional development associated with her board work that's allowed her to progress through the system. And next October, Missoula will actually be the host site for the Montana Conference of Education Leadership. So we appreciate Ann stepping forward to take on that role and look forward to a wonderful conference in Missoula next October. You know, behind the scenes oftentimes, we have Elizabeth seated at the end of the table. And Elizabeth has been our minutes taker for the last number of years and has done yeoman's work on behalf of the board and worked to keep the public apprised through very accurate and comprehensive minutes. We've had a transition in the superintendent's office. Part of the job description for the executive administrative assistant is to be the minutes taker. And we had previously made some accommodations that had caused us to hire Elizabeth for that service. But with that transition now, Elizabeth will transition out of the minutes taking role. And I wanted to take an opportunity tonight to recognize her publicly and to thank her for her dedication. Meeting after meeting, month after month, Elizabeth has been here, and we certainly appreciate all that you've contributed, and thank you for your service. Finally, on page 19 in the packet are a number of calendar items, and there are a few of note. Next Tuesday, October 30th, we'll have our annual retiree luncheon. That's largely to bring the retirees together to talk about the insurance program and any changes that are contemplated for the next year. However, it's a time for them also to engage in some fellowship and remain connected with the district. We'll conduct that at 11:30 a.m. at the DoubleTree, and certainly trustees are invited to participate. We, in November, are reaching the end of our first quarter and our first trimester, so we will have parent-teacher conferences. In the elementary schools, they'll be scheduled K-8. Most schools will do the couple evening sessions, but they'll be the week of November 9th and 10th. And then our high schools will also engage a couple evening sessions that week. And ultimately that means that students will not be in session Friday, November 10th, since staff will be devoting that extra evening time to conferences. We are scheduled for 2 regular board meetings in November, the 14th and then the 28th. We'll apprise the board of the status with regard to the 28th, which is the Tuesday following Thanksgiving, depending on what work might need to come before you, particularly with regard to the bonds. We also provide notice of the 2 December meetings, which would be December 12th and December 26th. We would not normally meet the day after Christmas, so we'll work to schedule any board agenda items to be completed December 12th and have a single meeting that month. Finally, a number of us, including members of the Missoula Education Association, will be attending another installment of our Networked Improvement Communities meetings. We'll be in Chicago November 1st through 3rd, so leaving next week. Again, we're working on a collaborative project talking about teacher recruitment, retention, and job satisfaction. Thank you.
And can I just ask one, is it Tuesday the 31st? or Monday the 30th?
Uh,
For the
Actually,
retiree
it
lunch.
must be Halloween. Dave? The retiree?
Okay.
We'll double check it.
Yes, it's just, it says the 30th on Tuesday, so I wasn't sure which, the day or the
It
date.
is, it is Tuesday, the 31st, Halloween.
Okay, great,
Thank you for catching that.
thanks. Thank you. And now it is time for any announcements from trustees. Trustee Kendall?
I was trying to ask a question before during public comment, and I knew that that was not okay, so I'll just rephrase it as a comment. In the agenda, and I could have brought this up earlier, and I apologize for not doing that, there are a couple of emailed items of public comment, and one of them refers to a letter attached. I don't know if this was an oversight. There is no letter. If the sender forgot to send the letter, so it isn't there. But anyway, it's not there. So I wonder if that letter exists somewhere in the administration's possession, if it could be added to the minutes or something like that, so people can see what the letter said. That's all. Thank you.
I think I have it right, but someone else from the Missoula County Public Schools also won an award last week, but he wasn't able to be there because he's transitioned into the building. But Russ Hendrickson was also selected for the second year in a row, I think, as the outstanding, basically, IT educator and innovator. No?
Technologist.
You've got the right terminology.
He was recognized for that award last spring, and as per tradition, they recognized him at several School Administrators of Montana events last spring and then again at MCEL this fall.
Any other announcements? Seeing none, then we move on to, first we'll move on to the items that remain on the consent agenda first, which is 3, to approve the revenue and expenditure reports, which are found on page 28. It is the July, August, and September 2017 revenue and expenditure reports that are attached. The warrants supporting them are available in the business office, and the recommendation is that we approve the attached revenue and expenditure reports. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Kendall and seconded by trustee Lorenzen. As I indicated, if it's on the consent report, we will not be discussing it as a board because it's considered something we see on a regular basis and it's routine and perfunctory. But if there's any public comment, we allow public comment. See none, then all trustees in favor of approving the attached revenue and expenditure reports for July, August, and September 2017, please indicate by raising your hands. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. And then we'll move back on the 2 items that were taken off the consent agenda. And the first is 7A1, which is to approve the MCPS student attendance agreements in the elementary and secondary. And so the recommendation is that the trustees approve the attached lists of students requesting to attend other school districts. And that list is found on page 21. So Pat, do you want to explain how this list is created and what it means?
You bet. So if students from districts, from our district, would like to attend a district, a different district, then they're required to sign a form of acceptance by the enrolling district and then by the district of residence, which these lists represent. And so we identify and bring these lists to the board for their approval in connection with the signing and filing of those forms. So the beginning on page 21, there's and then continuing on to 22, 23, 24, and 25, there are a list of students that reside in our district and attend schools outside of our district. And those are the, and actually there's one more page, 26 is the high school students of the same, that are district, or the students that reside in our district to attend high school outside of our district.
Any questions for Pat? Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I just wanted us to be able to actually talk about what's in the report. Do we wait till after the motion?
If you want to ask, yeah, if you want to ask questions first and have clarification made,
Okay,
the information, then we get the motion, then we have the discussion.
okay, well, I'll just wait. I mean, Mike,
Sorry. So Pat, do you know?
What I understand, and is that it is closed. That's what I understand, is that it's closed. And I wonder if they're open, I guess I don't know. I
Okay.
don't want to guess.
Yeah, I just thought maybe there was a change, and I'm on their website now, but I'm not seeing their information very quickly. So anyway, it was just something that it looked like it was new. I hadn't seen any of our students in our district attending Hellgate in past years.
Right.
There hasn't been. Okay. Trustee Decker?
Thanks. I'm just curious, I know we had talked about leveling and that whole question at a recent board meeting, and there obviously are, quite a number of kids who are doing this, and their families are choosing this, and I'm wondering, what would happen if lots of these kids decided to return, say, from target range for whatever reason? If there are, say, to Hawthorne, there's a pretty significant list there of kids. And so I'm wondering, do we just say, no, I'm sorry, or if you're in the district, in that region, then we'd have to make room for them? How does that work?
I think that's more relevant to the next topic, but if you want to.
If our students
Yeah.
who live in our region,
Oh, okay.
target range,
Yeah.
And you were asking when they come back.
if they all decided to all at
Okay,
once.
got it, thanks.
If they all decided to come back at once, we would certainly accommodate them within the district. There are a couple of things that we need to contemplate here, and one being, we just today began screening for architects for the Hawthorne School project. And I suspect once we complete the upgrades and additions at Hawthorne, we'll have some enhanced capacity. I haven't looked at it grade level by grade level to see what the impact on any specific grade level would be, but there are certainly a number. It would be speculation for me to say right now that we could or could not accommodate them all in our present classes. But if they were to return, just as we did in the fall, we would assess enrollments building by building, grade level by grade level, make determinations on whether to add additional staffing or to contemplate leveling.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
I don't know if this is a question for now or for discussion, but I was wondering about the historical numbers, if it's in line with what's happened in the past.
I don't have specific numbers, but it has been the case where we have a large number of students attending target range and a large number attending Bonner.
Yeah.
And I understand that a number of the students who attend target range from our district are students of parents who work at community hospital. This is just a anecdotal sort of reference. And then the students in Bonner who attend Bonner School would be students who would likely be in the East Missoula School District, but not all of them, but
Yeah,
these would be students that
I guess my point is just that, I mean, we see these every other board meeting, it seems, and I guess I was just noting that it seems to be pretty consistent. It's not like these 5 pages is like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden 150 kids just.
Right,
bolted.
this meeting is where we would see the larger number just because it's on the heels of
Right.
school starting.
Okay.
And then throughout the year, the
Yeah, throughout
numbers
the year, they
will.
seem to trickle
Right,
here and there.
that's
as
right.
kids move in. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Pat or Superintendent Payne? Seeing none, then the recommendation from the administration is that let me switch back to get the language. that we approve the attached list of students requesting to attend other school districts. Is there a motion? Moved by trustee Smith. Is there a second? Second by trustee Lorenzen. Now it's time for board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I asked to have this brought up because I think we need to look at sort of the scope of it. I think it's only recently that we've really started getting a list like this. For example, right now there's about 150 kids from MCPS attending Target Range. So for Target Range, that's probably a third of their enrollment. If they, and if it's a few kids here and there, they might put them in a classroom. They're hiring teachers, especially to serve our kids. If they may be building buildings to serve our kids. Now, that's their choice as a board. But if they get a board with a different point of view on that issue, because I've been on boards where they think that's just dollar signs, and then one day they wake up and go, wait a minute. And that's why other schools have closed enrollment. So I think we need to be aware of the scope of this, and were Target Range to close enrollment, what would be the impact, on us? We have certain schools that are extremely crowded. Washington's extremely crowded. Rattlesnake and Paxton are crowded. So each of them would get some kids back from Washington, either from Bonner. If Bonner did the same, let's say they reached a point where they were going to have to build, and they said, wait a minute, we're building for somebody else's attendance area. Because they really can't bond their own taxpayers to pay to build schools for our kids. So at some point, having been on a lot of boards, I think this is going to reach ahead, and some of these schools are going to start sending kids back. So I just kind of wanted us to start thinking about that. I think we're in a good position. We're adding capacity in most of our schools. And I think we certainly have capacity for these kids, whatever the reason. I too was surprised to see Hellgate Elementary taking 9 out of district when I too had understood they were a closed district. Frenchtown used to be closed, but I think they've opened up their high school. So I just wanted us to see the numbers and the scope of them, and to have this conversation, in public about, this is a large number of kids. This is an entire school, essentially. If you add them up, I think you really are looking at a whole nother school the size of Franklin or something. So I just wanted us to look at it and think about it and talk about it.
Thanks. Is there any other board discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I think that was probably well-served to discuss this now. I've been in places where, as systems grow and make these decisions go forward, that you just start to have to contemplate creating memorandums of understanding between systems about timing and commitment of the children to be where they're going to be for a year or whatever that time span might be agreed upon, and when it's okay for kids to switch schools. So I think going forward, that might be a solution, to think about going forward. The way to control that is to start talking to other districts about how are we going to manage this when the game changes. So I think it is a good idea to bring it up now. It's just preemptive because the growth is coming. So, yeah.
And then I think there was trustee Smith.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think that trustee Lorenzen brings up an excellent point. I think also it's important to point out that we reciprocate in that we do accept students from out of our district. However, we do charge a tuition which, and Pat can clear me up on the details, but my understanding is that it covers the difference in the overbase that a taxpayer within our district would pay to essentially basically make up for the difference between a taxpayer's family being in the district and their taxes paying for that student and not. Whereas Target Range, is my understanding, they don't charge that, which is what would bring up the situation that trustee Lorenzen pointed out. The other thing is that I wanted to point out that I think it's a very timely discussion. I'm glad that the citizens of Missoula and Missoula County voted to pass the bond and allow us to get the capacity, the extra capacity that we hope to use someday. I fully think that if these kids come back, hopefully it won't all be tomorrow and it won't all be at once. But I guess part of my point is that maybe Target Range will change but they may change to the same system we have and where they charge a tuition or something. So I think it's certainly unlikely that 150 kids would come back all at once, but it is important that we talk about, what we would do. And I think that Superintendent Thain pointed out that we do have the capacity right now, I think, and that's a good point. Thank you.
Any other board discussion? Trustee Brigstad?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in because I just have some experience out in this district, it being my district, and it is something that people are concerned about. Running for the seat, I did get people asking me about my opinion on students coming in from our district into Target Ranges district. So it was something I was questioned about, never by an administrator over there, a board member over there, but it is something that is being discussed. So it is something that should be on our radars.
Any other board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the attached list of students requesting to attend other school districts, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. And then we move on to what is the flip of what we were just discussing, which is to approve out-of-district attendance agreements where the board is asked to approve any student who wants to attend MCPS, and the list is found on page 26. Pat, is there anything else to add to that? Or 27? Oh, I'm looking.
I think the only thing I would add, and it follows up Mike's comment, and that is the tuition that's collected represents for our district the maximum allowed by statute, which is 20% of the A and B value. And the dollars we collect in tuition do not go into the coffers to be expended for any purpose. They go into the general fund to directly, well, they are expended for the purpose of operating the school district, but they offset directly the overbase levy that's assessed against our taxpayers. So the intent is to reflect a tuition payment that is essentially equivalent to the overbase tax payment by a tax resident, so that you don't have a situation where out-of-district students are coming in and the local tax base is subsidizing their education. So that's the intent of the calculation and the intent of the tuition, and we generate around $45,000 each district, and those dollars directly offset what we assess our taxpayers for the overbase levy.
Any questions for Pat? Trustee Smith?
Thanks, Pat. And just for clarity on that, I guess, can we, is it fair to say then that, obviously, if those kids were attending our district, we would have more A and B, but we would hopefully use that to hire more teachers to educate those students. So that being said, is it fair to say that basically it's a wash in that we as a district don't necessarily lose money because those kids are going to Target, and we don't make a whole lot of money on the kids that come here? Is that fair? I mean, what we're trying to do is cover costs both ways, basically. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's the A and B, or the attendance of a student, has a significant impact on our budgets because they're driven by our enrollment. And the role or the intent of the tuition piece has really more of a taxpayer impact, because certainly for a district that doesn't charge tuition, the additional enrollment has a very positive budgetary impact when you calculate your budgets. And to Trustee Lorenzen's point, that benefit can impact a taxpayer, in particular when you're running special levies or special assessments or bonds for upgrades to facilities. But not only then, but also in the general fund context. I think in Target Range's case, and not to get too off track, but I don't believe they run an overbase levy, in which case there wouldn't be an offset to an overbase tax levy in their district. I don't know about Frenchtown or the other school districts. But for us, we're, I think, in a way, being respectful of the taxpayer and saying if we do take out of district students, then there is a cost, and that cost offsets directly what the taxpayer would otherwise pay. It doesn't increase our budget. It merely offsets the taxpayer contribution. Hopefully that answers.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Pat? Seeing none? Just making sure that, I saw some questioning looks. So the recommendation is that we approve the attached out-of-district attendant agreements found on page 27. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Decker. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I guess this isn't, there's only one name on this list, if anybody's wondering. I know there have been a few other names. This is a much shorter list, and really the reason is that most of these kids, the target range kids are our high school kids. The Bonner kids are in our high school district. So we see this going on in the lower levels, but at the high school level, they're mostly all in our high school district anyway. So it becomes a much smaller situation. And I know there have been a few others, but nothing like the length of the other list that we saw. So that's all.
Thanks. Any other board discussion? Seeing none, we have a seconded motion. Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the attached out-of-district attendance agreements, which is one person, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Now we move on to 8A1.
Actually, we got to approve the last consent agenda item.
We did that first.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I did consent agenda items first, and then I moved to items that were no longer on the consent agenda. So now we're on to 8A1, which is to grant a waiver of a graduation requirement, and it looks like this is a good problem to have. Sounds like there's...
Yes, the parents of a student who currently attends Sentinel High School have asked for a waiver of a graduation requirement for career and technical education credit. And our high school, as well as the state of Montana's graduation requirement, says that each student shall complete one CTE credit. The reason for this request is that as a middle school student, this student actually attended Sentinel High School and completed a year of computer science, which would count as his CTE credit were he a high school student. He achieved an A each semester. And now that he's a full-time high school student, he's looking at loading his course schedule with AP courses and does not want to take another CTE course. So interestingly enough, as I was researching this, I discovered that there's actually a correction that needs to be made to our board policy and procedure because it grants authority to the superintendent to waive those requirements, whereas state statute actually says the local board of trustees may grant the waiver. So I'm bringing this to you now. We haven't in the past brought them to you because it's been done at the superintendent's level. However, in accordance with 1055-906 MCA, we would recommend that the trustees approve the waiver of a high school graduation requirement for one CTE credit for student OC.
Any questions for Mark? Trustee Brigstad?
Why did he not just get the credit when he was in middle school? Is there just no way to do that?
At present, there is not a way to do that. We've had extensive discussion, and actually, as part of our acceleration policy, we'll look to include that statement. There has been some concern that if, in fact, we grant middle school students credit for high school courses they attempt, that their eligibility clock starts ticking with the High School Association. However, I've had some conversation with Mark Beckman at the High School Association, and I believe we have a way to resolve that. So Karen, as you know, has championed the acceleration policy, and we've had some conversation about including a provision in the acceleration policy when it's a thoughtful and an intentional plan for a student to accelerate to be able to award high school credit.
Any other questions? Trustee Decker?
Thanks. I might be betraying my ignorance of how high school credits work because my son is only 9. But it is, by waiving this credit, is he now being required to replace it with something else? Like if he wasn't interested, say, in loading his his docket with AP courses. If he wasn't interested in carrying what you might call a full load, and he was like, I did this already and I'm good, are we able to give those students this kind of credit?
We have the provision to waive graduation requirements, and we would consider that individually. That will not be an issue with this student in terms of accrual of credits. We require 24 credits. The state requires 20 credits. So we certainly have a more rigorous program. And we do sometimes, particularly if it's driven by an individual education plan, waive that total number of graduation requirements. Credits.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
Mark, this is just a bit of a clarification on what you were talking about, the acceleration policy, I guess. And maybe it's a discussion for later, but I guess it's the credits and not the age that is driving this 1055-906. Whereas, my point being, if we were to change our policy and allow an 8th grader to get high school credits, it's the credits that is driving this, so we would not have to bring it to the board then. That would address it prior to it being an issue.
I believe you're correct, but I would want to verify that with the Office of Public Instruction. Our intent would be that if a student completed high school credit as a middle school student, it would be recorded at the end of the year, which is technically post-middle school graduation, at which time he technically becomes a high school student. Now, if you were to take that back to 7th grade, you might have a different issue. But as an 8th grader, June 10th, or whenever they graduate, then they're officially a high school student. Credit would be recorded at the conclusion of that semester.
Okay, yeah, and I know that this happens. I mean, my own son took a high school class in middle school, and it's not really an issue for everyone, but this is a more unique case in that he's using, or he would like to request a waiver. I know not a lot, but certainly a fair amount of middle schoolers have access to and are making great progress in the schools, and I appreciate that we have the flexibility to do that, and I'm looking forward to the acceleration policy recognizing that, but thank you for...
And I would actually clarify that it will be acceleration procedure, so
Procedure.
it'll go into the procedure manual.
Correct, which won't be in the policies, because we don't do that anymore.
Any other questions? So we don't have a motion yet, is that correct? So is there a motion that the trustees approve a waiver of the high school graduation credit requirement for 1 CTE credit for student OC based on the information that's been presented tonight? Moved by trustee Duggar, seconded by trustee Decker. I'm looking both ways, trustee Briggs and Decker. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Smith?
I guess my discussion would just be that I'm glad that we're building in flexibility and accommodating students of all abilities. I appreciate this.
Any other comments? I guess I just have one. At some point, I'd like to know why the state has weighed in on whether or not it should be the superintendent or school board that should make this decision, but that's a question for another day. But
I would say that statute has probably always said it's the local trustees that must do it, and I think our policy was probably crafted in error.
okay, okay, thank you. Any other trustee comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the waiver of the high school graduation requirement of 1 CTE credit for student OC, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 8A2, which is to consider the approval of an out-of-state travel request from the robotics team who wants to go to Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And so, Karen, it looks like you're going to give us a bit of an update.
Well, this is, I believe, the third time that our robotics team has gone to Calgary. Calgary is obviously a competitive robotics opportunity. We're here because it's out of the country, and being out of the country requires board approval.
questions for Karen? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the out-of-country travel requests to allow the robotics team to travel to a competition in Calgary, Alberta, Canada? Moved by trustee Kendall and seconded by trustee Decker. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the out-of-country travel request, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And we move to B1, which is Smart Schools 2020, and Superintendent Thane. I don't know if you have a comment first, or if I can move to Burley. So Burley, this is information only, but it's an update on what's going on with our various projects.
Yeah, thank you. So Cold Springs construction continues as normal. It's going really well over there. We're going well everywhere. We don't really have any problems, which is great news. Cold Springs has their new name down to five names, and they're out for vote, and I believe they're all going to be tallied tomorrow, and then they will ultimately come to you and for final approval of what you see best for the new name. So kind of exciting process, and I really give kudos to Susan and all those staff over there that made that EIT team and the rest of the staff. It's been quite a process. It's not something that's real simple to do. Washington, we have it is in the permitting process. The city asked for some clarification on a couple things. Dowling, the architect company, has submitted those, and we're waiting for the permit to be issued with those submittals or those clarifications. Russell is also submitted, and we're waiting to hear back. Hopefully we should hear something back here this week or next week, whether or not where we're at with those with that permit. We're looking at a lot of good construction going at Willard. It's excavating the old parking lot up right now, and it's been viewed from the third floor. You can have a nice little view into the old parking lot. Today they found some remains of, not the bad remains, but the remains of the original old Willard that was used to be on that parking lot site. So kind of a nice little tidbit there. Hellgate is going really well as well, and kudos to the staff over there. I've heard, and to the contractors over there, we've heard very little issues coming out of there, and the process is going along very well. We're currently working with the city and with MDT on the TA grant that WGM submitted for us, and we were approved on, which we informed the board a few meetings ago. So we're working on that. It's a safe route for our kids to cross Gerald to our new main entrance, as well as a safe route to a park, which we call River Bowl, for sports activities, PE classes, that kind of thing. So it's a great grant, and we'll be working closely with those folks to get a great design in place. Meadow Hill, we have the architect interviews from Meadow Hill tomorrow, so we'll be bringing that to the next board agenda as well on our recommendation. We shortlisted 2 firms for the Hawthorne project today, so we're excited about that as well. And then I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
I heard a rumor that, and I want you to answer this, that Hellgate High School will not have heat this winter. Tell me if that's true.
I cannot lie to you, Diane. It will have heat this winter. We've already fired the boilers up, and they're running, so, yes. Thanks for clarifying that, though.
Yeah, I actually have 2. So you said that it was down to 5 names for Cold Springs. Do you have those names in front of you, or can you tell us what they are?
I can.
Just out of curiosity.
I just wrote them down here. I know one is Jeanette Rankin. One is Bitterroot. Miller Creek. 3 Rivers. Is it Maloney Ranch? Or Mountain View? Mountain View. So not Maloney Ranch, Mountain View. So
And
I
then,
think 5 great names.
And if I would just clarify, there were originally approximately 40 submissions, and the EIT culled it down to those 5. They're actually out right now to be ranked in survey form, 1 through 5, by the Cold Springs community, including 1 per household and then each student. And then that will all be tabulated tomorrow. And the board will receive all 5 names along with their respective ranking and point total for your consideration in November.
Trustee Lorenzen? Or did you have another question?
Yeah, I had another question.
Yeah.
I just had a question about Hellgate too. It's just kind of hard to tell exactly what's happening, but like, where are you guys at when you just drive by it? But like, where are you guys at in the project? Like, what does it look like inside of the school right now? Are all the teachers displaced at this point, or is it just like normal business as usual?
Well, it depends on who you ask if it's business as usual. It is, right now, they working on the cafeteria and the administration office in that main area in between there. The whole idea is, and we're still on schedule to get the cafeteria switch over during Christmas. So we'll have the new cafeteria, and then they'll start working on the library and the mechanical stuff, whatnot. But, so we'll start seeing here shortly where we'll start seeing them work vertically to get all the HVAC system operating correctly. And that'll start displacing 6 to 9 teachers at a time. And then we'll kind of just rotate around throughout the entire building. So, and we have a great plan in place. Judson's worked really well with the staff, well communicated, and you'll have some teachers moving around, working off of cards, that kind of thing. But it's only for like a 6 to 8 week, 10-week process. So it's not like it's going to happen for an entire semester or anything like that.
And that's after winter, you said? After the winter break?
Well, we'll get the kitchen back after winter break. We should see the mechanical stuff happening sooner than that, I believe.
Well, I had a question on the Cold Springs new names. When you use a person's name like Jeanette Rankin, is there an approval process you have to go through with the family or something? And then the other question on these other names, do you have to like go around and see if someone has trademarked them or something? Is there some sort of vetting like that?
Mark?
I think that's an excellent question. First of all, if it did come down to Jeanette Rankin, I think that it would be appropriate to see if we could find any appropriate contact. There are a number of facilities around the state, or such as the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center, but I don't know if there are any other schools, and I don't know that we have identified or can identify family, but that's a good question. As far as trademark, I'm not aware that any of those would be trademarked, but I think it would be worthy of exploration. Good point.
I think can I add 2 cents on that one? It would be worth determining for sure. I think if it's a reference to a common name in connection with a school, there wouldn't be an infringement because we're not taking and trading upon a name that's being used for a similar use. So Three Rivers, there's lots of uses of Three Rivers in commercial settings, and the trademark infringement bears upon whether or not you're trading upon the good name of another company, and so I think it'd be worth exploring, but I don't think there would be an infringement. The Jeanette Rankin one is another question altogether, though. But
Any other questions? Trustee Decker?
Thanks. I seem to remember that Gerald has a kind of a special place in Missoula's bike walk pedestrian planning process as the main alternative to Higgins. And at various times, improvements to Gerald have been suggested that would make that more doable, like those little things that stick up in the street and make it narrower so that people kind of slow down. Not necessarily concrete bump outs, but like the sticky uppy sign things. It's a very technical term. So I'm wondering what the coordination is in terms of the grant that you're talking about with the Bike Walk Pedestrian Office, Ben Weiss et al.
Yeah, they've been at every meeting with Parks and Rec and looking at what the city's overall master plan is for trail systems and bike paths and safe route to schools. So they're heavily going to be involved, and we welcome their partnership as well. Like I said, we've had a few meetings already, and there'll be more planned down the road. We'll be looking at having the engineers is selected through MDT which we will have selected in December. So then we'll kind of all come to the table and start looking at a plan. So we kind of, we issued a concept to apply for the grant. And so now we'll kind of start fine tuning that concept and really come up with a great plan, how it fits within other trails and systems and how other safe walkways are done within Missoula City.
This is in response to both trustee Lorenzen's and trustee Bragstad's questions. I taught a couple of suicide prevention classes yesterday at Hellgate, and it was very hot. And we couldn't open the windows because there was construction going on right outside. So there's plenty of heat. And everything seemed really normal. You know, I was there between class changing time, and it's just the same old Hellgate as always, yeah.
Any other questions for Burley on this topic? Seeing none, this is information only, but any public comment? Seeing none, then we move on to number 2, which is a bond expenditure update. So Pat, we turn it over to you.
Thanks. There's a summary of the bond expenditures on page 42. The expenditures are broken down by school and then into the various facility categories. It's through August. It represents all of our bond expenditures through that period of time. If we look at wrapping up our bond projects by December 2020, which is our goal, we're approximately a third of the way through our projects on a month basis, which is very good. Our bond passed in 2015 in November, and we had funding in February, I want to say, following the January 2016 issuance. So right now, if we just looked at percentages, we're 40% expended of the original par value of the bond issuance in the elementary, and about 19% on the high school. We know going forward that into next year, we're pushing hard on a number of large projects. So the first summer out of the chute was a busy summer, and I think they, looking at the schedule, just keep getting busier, which is great. In the future, what Kara and I have talked about doing is incorporating a separate schedule that would just identify the anticipated completion dates for the various projects and sort of an idea where these projects are in the, from a summary standpoint in the context of their start date, completion date, that type of thing. But we're looking good. You can see that we've expended a significant amount of funds through August.
Any questions for Pat? I have one question. What kind of expenditures fall under soft costs?
So soft costs would include all our design and engineering expenditures. It would also include our underwriter fee for bond issuance, our attorney fees for bond issuance. Expenses related to construction that we will capitalize ultimately, but are not directly incorporated within the construction.
Any other questions for Pat? Seeing none, this also is an informational-only item, but any public comment? Seeing none, then we'll move on to number 3, which is to approve a beach transportation contract extension. So the background information explains a bit of what has been going on with negotiating some revisions to current contracts. So Pat, if you want to kind of bring us up to speed.
So myself, Burley McWilliams, and Joe Potter, before he retired, and then Terry Phelan, since he retired, participated in a number of negotiating sessions with beach transportation. And the recommendation, as included in the background information, is to extend the beach transportation contract, and this is for regular transportation to and from school, special education transportation, for a term of 5 years. So that would extend the contract through June of 2022. The rate increase for the next 2 years would be 4.5% on the regular and special education routes, and then would be 2% for the activity and athletic travel. And we had those rates frozen for, I want to say, 4 years now. So this represents, even though it's 2%, if you look at the overall expenditure of about 300,000 in that area, it's about 4% of 300,000. So dollar-wise, it's not at the same level, but it's certainly impactful to the athletic departments at the schools, but also recognizing the fact that the costs have been frozen for a number of years with Beach. Burley, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Pat summed it up really well, and the only thing I'll clarify is we were currently in a 5-year contract, and we were starting year 3 of the 5-year contract. So that's what, and then we're renewing it another 5 years. So I just want to make sure that was correct or understandable.
Any questions of Pat or Burley? Trustee Newbold?
Sorry if I didn't catch this. For how many years was the fee or the cost frozen?
Yeah, I want to say 4 years of the athletic activity fees.
Okay.
And it's either 3 or 4 years that they had been frozen.
Okay, and then just one other, what has been the historical percentage rate increase over the years?
And I don't have that in front of me, but the previous 2 years, as Burley mentioned, we are under a 5-year agreement with Beach, and we had that ran through 2020. And the first 2 years were at 3.5%, and then the following 3 were subject to negotiations, and we negotiated not only a rate increase, but also a new contract, or renewed the contract for additional 5 years. And that's been a typical practice of ours in negotiating with Beach, partly because they are a capital-heavy industry, so they do make long-term investments in equipment in the form of buses. So for them and their capital planning, it's helpful to be under contract with us. We're their primary customer. And so in terms of past history, I would be guessing if I went beyond the previous 2 years at 3.5. I would say that the 4.5 is near the higher end of the rates that we've negotiated in the past. I think what Beach is experiencing is sort of what other districts that you may have read about around the state have experienced, which is driver shortages and difficulty in recruiting and retaining drivers. Beach, to their credit, have an excellent relationship with their drivers, and they've done a good job of meeting our needs, both in to and from school and then in activity athletic travel.
So the activity has been frozen for 4 years, but the regular routes have not been frozen, is that right? I got another question, I guess. Do we have a way to know that if we, this is a big increase, do we have a way to know that it goes to the drivers as salary and wages, and, or could we have more information about this, is my question?
You could. We do get into, at a certain level, their expenditures, but we also are trying not to be incorporated within their business, so we're trying to maintain still an arm's length transaction with them. The rates that they shared with us during negotiations and the rates that we independently reviewed, that Joe Potter pulled data on in the context of the negotiations, we'd be happy to share. And much of that related to what other school districts were paying for drivers, where Beach fit, that type of thing. It's really difficult to compare bus companies, just because the rates are structured differently. Some are built on miles, some are built on routes, some are built in, on consumption of gas, and we're very different compared to other districts. Some districts own their buses, and so they're compelled to manage the maintenance and do those types of things. And so when we look at this, we usually look at where we fit in pre and post negotiations, and we're always sort of in the middle of the pack, 2 or 3 or 4 relative cost, as best we can tell, because it isn't always very easy to make those comparisons. But I know from the conversations with Beach is that they're committed to a bump in pay for their drivers, and they talked with us at some length about where they're at now and where they see them going with pay for drivers. But I think Burley could probably pull a lot of that data that he and Joe pulled together and share with you guys.
I imagine this is not the right place to ask this question, but I have to ask anyway, and maybe it can be an agenda item for another time. But it makes me think of the whole conversation about later start times for high school, and just whether that came up during the discussions, if they're looking toward, you know, whatever additional capital costs they may have for that sort of thing.
It did not come up in negotiations. I couldn't say whether it was on their mind or not, but it was not a topic of discussion.
Any other questions of Pat or Burley?
So there isn't really another bus company in Missoula, is there?
There's not. We have, I think, a 75-year relationship with Beach Transportation, and what we do have is a track record of safety and service and that type of thing. So we're pleased with the service that's provided.
I'm also guessing that that's not atypical around the state. Probably most cities or school districts would have one company that they're working with, and so this process is probably pretty typical in that a large school district probably has one company that's really serving their needs, and it's kind of that mutual relationship.
It is, and I think I guess I'd say there's some horror stories out there in terms of family bus companies that finally roll over to a larger organization, and just where the prices go from there. And I think you know, up till this point, it's been a relationship with a family-owned business. I think Great Falls is the only one left like us in that respect, where it's a family-run business, other than the school districts that operate their own buses, which there are those as well. And that's a different fund, that's a different levy, but in the same sense that you make a capital investment and then you're obligated to run a bus company essentially. But yeah. Burley, did you have anything to add on that question in terms of the other companies around this state?
I think the only thing I'll add is some of the benefits too that I know I've noticed with Beach is you get some of the other companies that are maybe nationally based companies where if you do a bus stop change, it costs money. If you they're always we don't have that. When we do a bus stop change, it just gets changed in the routes. Beach makes it work, and they become, you know, they kind of sit at the table with us and try to help problem solve things first, and we feel like that's something that's very valuable to the district. You know, they don't, if we've came to the board a few times in regards to increasing some routes based off needs, and they're not real quick to just grab a new route and a new bus and charge us a whole other $45,000 a year. It's very critical that you sit down, you problem solve it, and you figure out how you can work these kids in on other bus routes and make it work within that. So they're not always real quick to to kind of jump to, this is what we think your needs are, or they'll really work with the district. And I've heard as Pat kind of referenced, some horror stories regarding those kind of things, and so we feel very fortunate to have Beach as a partner.
Trustee Smith, a question?
First, I guess I'd like to recognize that long relationship that Pat noted, and thanks for being on the negotiating thing. My question is, with this years 1 and 2, we have the increase built into the contract, and years 3, 4, and 5 am I reading this right in that years 3, 4, and 5, that percentage is what gets negotiated? Or is it typical, did I hear you right, that it's typical during year 3 or 4 that we just renew the whole 5-year contract? And I guess my question is, what's the difference between this and a 2-year contract?
What I'd say is just in the sense of locking down a service provider that has that sort of history, and it does become a renewal of an existing contract, and it does mean that in the end of year 2, we would either be negotiating, or we'll look into it as negotiating the rates for years 3, 4, and 5. They're the ones that bring to the table the idea of, we'd like to extend for another 5 years, or renew for another 5 years. And I do think their motivation is related to large capital investment and us as a primary customer in that
Okay.
operation.
And I guess, I assume, and I, based on the fact that we have this great relationship with Beach, it's never been an issue, but I assume that if for some reason we can't come to some agreement during one of those negotiating years, there's a default. Is the default 0, or is the default continue at 4.5?
Yeah, the agreement calls for renegotiation. What historically has happened, much like we would do with our bargaining groups, is we would continue under existing rates.
Okay.
And then when we make resolution, we would retro the rates back to that beginning date.
Okay.
If we, God forbid, didn't come to terms on a extension or a rate, then there wouldn't be there's not a compulsion to agree. I couldn't imagine what would be involved in the unwinding of that type of service or relationship. So it's to our benefit to have a very good service provider in place, which they are, and so we look at that as having some benefit to us as well, although we do negotiate from the standpoint of that's of greater benefit to them than it is to us, really, that security is, the longer-term contract.
Yeah. And it got to help us too.
It does.
So obviously, okay,
Yeah, it does.
appreciate it, thank you.
I guess this came to my mind. So we are signing a contract through June 30th of 2022. Does the contract say that if they sell to a corporate owner, our contract is null and void and we start over? Or can they sell our contract and obligate us to work with a corporate owner if they were to sell the company?
That's a good question, and I think what would apply, and I'd have to look back at the contract, would be there's likely a non-assignment provision in the contract that basically says that they're not, I would expect to see in the contract that without our permission, they're not able to do an assignment. But it's also a contract that has a provision that talks about change in circumstances and laws and regulations that would compel additional negotiations. Not sure that provision, again, I'd have to look at it, would apply in this case, but I think that there would be some negotiations if we got into that circumstance, whereby we weren't whereby the contract wasn't breached to our detriment. I mean, I think there's a difference between a breach of a contract and then what you might be talking about.
Any other questions for Pat? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the renewal and extension of the contract with beach transportation at the proposed rates for fiscal year 18 and 19 as described in the background information. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Smith. Is there a board discussion? Seeing trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I think having asked so many questions, I'm glad to hear all that. I'm pleased to know that, especially that beach doesn't take advantage if we have a change condition, because that can just eat you up if you become sort of afraid of your bus company. And I'm glad we still have this kind of relationship. Puts me in mind of the water company. I don't want us to have to buy it back ever. So I think it's an ideal relationship, and I'm pleased that we can continue it.
Any other board comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the renewal and extension of the contract with beach transportation at the proposed rates for fiscal year 18 and 19. And I assume that also includes renewing it for a term of 5 years as well. Correct? Okay.
Yes.
So all those in favor of that, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is all trustees present. And then we move on to number 4, which is to approve the Conley Transportation Addendum. Who is Conley and what do they transport?
So again, a family-run business up in Sealy, and they're our transportation company for student transportation for our students at Sealy Lake High School. And very much a family-run business, very much a different scale of operation than beach transportation, but they still do a fine job nonetheless. And similar to the beach contract, this is a request to renew for an additional 5-year term. We try and keep the Conley contract on the same schedule as beach. It doesn't need to be, but we negotiate over a number of weeks with beach transportation, and then have a short discussion with Conley and basically come to terms, and these are the terms that they've proposed, which are reasonable and we're supportive of.
Thanks. Any questions for Pat about Conley Transportation? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that we approve the negotiated increased rates paid to Conley Transportation for fiscal year 18 and 19 and renew the contract for a term of 5 years. And the increase in rates is explained in the background information. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Bragstad and seconded by trustee Duggar. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all those in favor of approving the negotiated increase in rates paid to Conley Transportation for fiscal year 18 and 19 and renewing the contract for a term of 5 years, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's all trustees present. Then we move on to number 5, which is to authorize the engagement of a Sentinel General Contractor Construction Manager. The recommendation comes forward to engage Langless and Associates to act as the GCCM for Sentinel. So Burley, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. We had 7 submittals on this overall. Our first step is to do an RFQ, request for qualifications. We take those 7 submittals and we qualify them. And if they qualify, we ask them to submit a request for a proposal, which includes how they're going to deliver the project and what fees are required for that, to deliver that kind of project, and what their plans are with subcontractors and how the safety of the company, and then we score that and we invite up to 4 back for interviews, and we are happy to suggest selecting Langless and Associates for the Sentinel project. We haven't worked with Langless yet, and we're very excited to do so. They came with a very good proposal and a very good interview, and tonight we have Jeremiah and Jason from Langless, and we appreciate them coming down and sitting through the board meeting and becoming more knowledgeable on MCPS. So, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. Other than that, before you do that, though, I want to make sure I get the committee thank the committee for their time, and that was Pat McHugh, Superintendent Thane, Trustee Duggar, Regional Director Julie, and who am I missing? Did I miss somebody else?
Ted Fuller.
Thank you, Ted Fuller, the principal. Okay, forget Ted. So I want to thank them for their time. Selecting the general contractor is very, very time consuming, and we do appreciate that time. So thank you.
Any questions for Burley? Trustee Lorenzo?
Hi. If I have to come here, I'm going to talk. No, I'm just wondering who the architect is at Sentinel. I've forgotten.
Thank you. MMW, which has done a fantastic job on Sentinel as well.
Any other questions? So the recommendation is that we authorize the engagement of Langless and Associates to act as the general contractor and construction manager for Sentinel High School construction. Is there such a motion? Moved by Trustee Duggar. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Bragstad. Is there any board discussion?
Yeah, I want to comment on this.
Sure.
So, first off, I want to say sitting on that committee was a great experience, and I want to give some assurances to the public that it's a serious vetting process. So I want to go on record saying that. The caliber of the folks that we selected was excellent, all of them. And so the decision-making was very close. And I don't think that it could have been done any better, or that there would be a better process to get this done as far as selecting the right folks for the job.
Any other board comment? Seeing none, any public comment? Or if you want to come up and just, if you can state your name, and if it's an unusual spelling, since we're on TV, if you can come to the podium, and if you click it on,
Talk. How's that? We just want to thank the board and Missoula County for selecting us. We're anxious to get started. So we'll do a good job for you guys. So really appreciate it. So thank you guys all. Thanks.
Any other board comment or public comment? Seeing none, then all those trustees in favor of authorizing the engagement of Langless and Associates to act as the general contractor and construction manager for the Sentinel High School construction projects, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to item number 6, which is a general fund update, which is informational. And so, Pat, you've got an attachment on page 43.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. We're through the first quarter of the year, of the fiscal year. Page 43 and 44 have information regarding our general fund expenditures and budgets, and really it's very early in the process, but we are where we should be with respect to our expenditures. I'm only going to point out one expenditure item, and it's contracted services. And if you look on page 43, it's below the salary and benefit line, and there's a $580,000 budget on the elementary side and $487,000 on the high school side. That budget on the high school side represents a number of items, but a significant item is our SRO, CROs. And the reason I bring that up is we get billed at the end of the year, so this budget will exist through the year, and then it'll be expended out. So that's not unusual. And on the elementary side, we we budget our preschool program through Fund 15 and then move those expenditures over here. And that's also a large expenditure that gets adjusted near the end of the year. So don't be alarmed if that budget stays intact through the bulk of the year and then is adjusted at the end of the year. So the other one that's on the opposite side is our insurance, property liability insurance. I'm sorry, I said I'd talk about one. I'm adding one more. But that expenditure is front-loaded, and that's what's required by the insurance company. So you'll see that expenditure has taken place for the entire year, and it represents essentially the entire budgeted amount. That's all I have.
Any questions for Pat? This is information only, but any public comment? Seeing none, then we move on to item number 7, which is the Technology Fund update. We'll hear from Wright.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to present the first quarter of the Technology Fund. The ending balance is $1,596,644. And during the first quarter, I'd just like to tell you the majority of our purchases were for minor equipment, software license renewals, which include security, instructional technology applications, web hosting, content filtering, and our backup solutions. I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Wright? Seeing none, thank you for that update. And as this is informational only, nonetheless, any public comment? Seeing none, thank you. Then we move on to the next item, which is the Transportation Fund update. So Burley, what's the update on transportation?
Yeah, so this is through quarter one, which I'm not, I might propose that we move this to actually be quarter one rather than the first month of the transportation fund, but we've used 3% of the elementary and 4% on the secondary. Of course, those numbers will shift a little bit based off of tonight's approval of the new rate, so there will be some retro payback through January 1st or July 1st for transportation provided from that date on. So those numbers will shift a little bit, but it won't be drastic. And I can answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Burley about the transportation fund expenditures? Trustee Decker?
What salaries go into the transportation fund?
There's some administrative salaries in there.
Okay.
Principals. So it recognizes, I think, 10% of the principal salary, their involvement with buses and transportation to and from school.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, this is information only, but any public comment? Seeing none, then we move on to the Building Reserve Fund update. And Burley, back to you again.
Thanks. Those are on page 48 and 49, and if you're keeping track from quarters prior, these are pretty low. We've really been slim over the last quarter, and you know, of course, we all know about the bond projects, doing a lot of building upgrades and whatnot, but it's really operations and maintenance tightening our belt a little bit to make sure we spread these building reserves as long as we possibly can in the best interest of taxpayers. So we're trying to make these work as best we can. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as far as some of the expenses here.
Trustee Smith?
Just to reiterate that earlier for clarification, the elementary reserve expired, is that the one that expired? Did it expire last year? And then because we had one that was 5 years and one that was 7, right? And I think it was like 6 years ago. And we did not renew those due to the bond, correct?
Correct. So the building reserves were passed in 2011. The elementary expired last June of 16. Sorry, not last June, but 2016.
Okay.
And then the high school reserve expires June of 18. This coming up June.
And not renewing those, you've been able to actually, it looks like, extend the length of that elementary ones because we still have some left over, like you said.
We are holding this as steady as we possibly can. Yeah, these were based off, the elementary is based off a $500,000 a year budget.
Right.
We've been operating at about 150 to 200,000, somewhere in there, more closer to 150. And the high school was based off a $450,000 budget, And we've been trending that same as the elementary, probably $150,000 to $200,000 a year.
And a lot of those savings is due to bond expenditures covering some of the reserves, the building expenses.
Yeah, there has been some of that as well. And then there's been some creative spending as well, as far as using our trades guys more to do
Okay.
some things. So there's been some ways of us trying to spread that dollar as well.
Okay, I guess my question then, that leads up to my question, which, like Diane said, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to talk. I like that, Diane, thank you, I'm stealing that. So as we move forward, I know that we used to do it, snow plowing and stuff was out of this fund, if I'm not mistaken. Those expenses could be here in spades this year. Do we have a plan, maybe this is a question for Mark and Pat, as these building reserves taper out, they're not being refilled at this point, do we have a plan for changing how we pay for those plowing and other regular maintenance activities, or is that yet to be determined?
I would say for the long term, it's yet to be determined. I think for this year, it'll still fall within the building reserve. And the good thing with the building reserve is that while we've had that reserve in existence, we received school block grant dollars that we deposited to that fund. And this year, as part of that House Bill 647 we talked about, where they're dumping the block grants from the state, the impact to us wasn't necessarily in the general fund, it was here. But the good news is that for a number of years, that's added to our carryover in the building reserve. So even though, Burley's identifying what's been allocated for O&M expenditures, we still have a part that we've set aside as carryover that hasn't been allocated for O&M to expend. So that's for trustee authorized expenditures. And I don't have that balance in front of me, but every year we adopt budgets, we'll adopt a budget that incorporates those carryover dollars. And so we do have some reserves, if you will, that are available.
Okay, so and maybe I'm not understanding everything, but so is there still some money annually going into that fund?
No money annually. That's
Not
the
anymore.
tricky part, is that.
Because
for
those
the-
block grants would have been the only thing still going into it.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, and the
that's what I
levies
thought.
will expire, as Burley mentioned, next year, the high school levy will expire.
Right.
And then we'll be at the point of planning more on the long-term basis to solve for O&M type expenditures that will still come up, even with all the bond work that's done, there'll still be O&M type expenditures.
That'll be for some other board to determine.
Another board discussion, yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Well, I see we have at Paxson, you repaired chain link fence, at Big Sky, you repaired brick, which made me wonder, do you spend a lot of money fixing vandalism? Or is that what this is, and that sort of thing?
The chain link fence at Paxson was with the design of the new facility. They wanted to kind of make a little outdoor learning center, and so that wasn't a vandalism. The Big Sky one was, someone drove into our building. And so, my trades guys, my painters, they have some good recipes for getting vandalism, kind of stuff cleaned off. And, I think our biggest vandalism is broken windows. And yeah, we do buy a lot of broken windows, for sure.
I was just gonna mention on the Big Sky vandalism, which it was, Word negotiating with the insurance company for the person who ran into that wall. So once we settle that, then we'll be able to offset that expenditure.
And sometimes we know who created the vandalism, and we do the same way. We'll get restitution out of it that way. So sometimes we get some compensation back out of it, but not always.
Any other questions for Burley on the building reserve fund? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. Just to explain what's going to happen at the rest of the meeting, we're going to have public comment on non-agenda items, since we allow that both at the beginning and end of every meeting, in case someone can't get here at the beginning of the meeting. Then we're going to move into executive session to discuss the proposed draft minutes from 3 different executive session meetings that we've had, but we're actually going to move back into regular session to approve the minutes, and we'll just identify them by date. But in order to have a discussion, if anyone wants to discuss what's contained in the draft minutes, I have determined that the public's right to know is outweighed by our ability to look at areas of litigation strategy and personnel issues. So we'll be moving into executive session for that session, but we will come back out just to vote on the minutes. So at this point, any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, then we'll move into executive session, which means everyone else gets to go home.